Knife sharpening. There are many ways to get an edge back on your knife when it has started to go a little bit dull. Many companies claiming to have the easiest or the most effective or the cheapest and most effective ways of sharpening knives. I'm going to rank all the ones I've ever used on a tier list from the worst to the best. I haven't used every knife sharpener, and as I review more knife sharpeners, I'll probably refer them back to this tier list and place them accordingly. But there's about 20 odd sharpeners on this list, so let's get into it. Let's get cracking with the bottom tier. The literal ass of the class is the carbide pull-through sharpeners. These are not recommended in any sense. These are for, at best, very disposable knives that you just want to get an edge back on until you can get to the shop and buy another one. These guys work by basically forcing a new edge over whatever little edge angle you had on there. They will grind out using two rough carbide intersecting blades a new edge angle, usually quite broad, usually quite roughly hewn. In fact, I'll show you this poor knife here before and after it came into contact with this specific carbide sharpener. Absolutely guts any edge that was there and replaces it with almost a serrated style knife edge. And I mean, I guess in quantum terms, every knife edge is somewhat serrated, but these just absolutely gore out the edge. They're not gentle, they reduce the life of your knife, they chase the edge up towards the spine, and any nice knife you have is certainly not worth putting anywhere near a sharpener that looks like any of these here. I've got the Smith's Pocket Pal, I've got a Lansky little sharpener thing there, I've got the Edge Master, I've got another Smith's, I've got this AccuSharp, which is probably the worst sharpener I've ever had. And anything that looks a bit like this, there is one I'll talk about in just a second that's not quite in the absolute stinker tier, but realistically speaking, if you care about your knife, avoid sharpeners like this. Ceramic pull-through sharpeners are slightly better than the carbide variants. These go a little bit easier on your knife. The best one out of these, which I suppose is like being the tastiest turd at a shit show, is the IKEA pull-through sharpener. Here it's got 3 grades of ceramic wheel that you can somewhat tune a knife edge, even though it is still just whatever angle this is, and without really many other options. Most other ones only have 1 or 2 wheels. This guy's here has 1 wheel with just a guide that swaps over it. This one's got a fine or a coarse. This is a Priority Chef. Look, these aren't terrible. They're sort of all well enough made, I guess, although the Fiskars have had this break on me a couple of times. But yeah, still no options and still no real thought. These are still the mindless sharpeners that are sold as an easy way to get a very rudimentary edge back on your knife. Don't take any marketing hubbub that these are going to do any better than a very basic sharp-ish edge, because I've never been able to get anything with just these that I would say is an enjoyable slicing experience. So we're out of the complete danger zone now, and I present to you about the only almost recommendable pull-through sharpener. It's still got carbide jaws, but this guy here has an exchangeable or an alternative type of grind to it, so you can alter your jaws slightly with this switch at the top to put a somewhat convex-ish edge on your knife, which isn't as horrible, isn't as abusive to the edge structure as the standard V's often are. Those V's really do pinch. And this one I can get a slightly nicer, slightly sharper edge on. It's a work sharp, so everything in this is pretty good quality, like the ceramic stones are pretty good. It's fine for a pull-through sharpener, which again is a pretty heavy qualifier, and I still wouldn't ever really choose this as my even backup to a backup. But if you need to buy a pull-through sharpener for some kind of hypothetical emergency kit, then this is definitely the one to get. It's still pretty cheap, and it'll do an okay job as a pull-through sharpener can do. You can wear that one as a hat, Bricky. Moving up to a pretty, we're out of the danger zone now. We're relatively quality stuff from here on in, and really it's going to be the capabilities that sit on the tier list where it ends up. These are kind of pocket sharpeners, or even micro sharpeners, really. They're not even, I've got a pocket sharpener later on that I'll talk about. These are very sort of purpose specific, I would say, for touching up at best, for mild sharpening at the most, for any of these guys here. whether it's due to their size or their grit limitations or whatever. So we've got the work sharp. This is, I think, the pocket angle sharpener, something similar to that. It's got a good work sharp diamond abrasive on one side. It's got an angle guide you can use, and on the other side it's a ceramic rod that you can use and I suppose rotate if it starts to get a bit scungy, maybe not. At any rate, it's a very basic experience that will do a competent, repeatable edge on a pocket knife. If you sort of are attuned to this and you have your knife already set to this, then I guess, yeah, you can use this one to keep it sharp. I personally would choose a piece of leather on a piece of wood to do all of my knife maintenance, but there you go. If this is something that interests you, it's a quality product. But yeah, certainly very middling as a sharpening experience. This is an Easy Lap diamond stone. You get these Easy Laps in several different grits and colors. They are good for axes. I like them for bringing to the blade. They're comfortable, you got a lot of handle on them, and you bring them to the knife to sharpen or to the axe. Again, probably not my choice for a pocket knife sharpener, but a quality product nonetheless, and a good diamond abrasive. So I have absolutely no issues with Easy Laps being in your little just-in-case kits or whatever. Folk can even make a couple of pretty good little portable stones. This is the DC3, they make a DC4, I think they do a few DCs that increase in size. And this is their little FS3. This is like a little automatic, I just got it because I think that's fun. Automatic sort of ceramic and diamond stone as well. Back is diamond, front is ceramic. And yeah, you can, again, bring this to the blade and do some rough touch-up jobs. You know, if you had this in a survival kit, you'd probably be able to, you know, with enough time and effort, get a good edge back on a knife, like a proper good edge. But yeah, really, these are hobbled by their capabilities, like their size and their abrasive, like, quality is all good, the abrasive quality, but it's just the size and the awkwardness in using them as your main sharpening solution. But all quality products, so happy to put them comfortably in the middle tier, you know? Next is fixed angled sharpeners with manual attributes. So the Spyderco Sharpmaker and the Worksharp Angle Set. These guys are great for getting your head around the initial concepts relating to fixed, not fixed blade, what would be the term? Hands-free sharpening. So they set the angle for you, and all you're required to do as the user is usually chop downwards. And so that's a really good start in your brain gradually working out how angles apply, how, you know, steady hands are important, those sorts of things. And with these, you can get good quality abrasives, and they really could start to be your all-in-one kit with very few bothers at all. So Spyderco have been making their Sharpmaker forever. You can get lots of different stones and sticks and rods for it, and a lot of people find this is their one and they stop here and they live a completely happy knife life with it. I like a little bit more, so they're not really going to raise above this tier for me. Both of them are sort of limited somewhat by their grits and somewhat by their options and their sizes and whatnot. And I think they're generally great intermediate sharpeners that maybe are fine for you, but if you do really get into nice edges, you're going to want to evolve past these, you know, fairly quickly, in terms of you'll feel a couple of really sharp edges put on with later systems. And yeah, you might want a little bit more from your experience. But both are cost effective, both are great. I recommend both of them if you just want somewhere comfortable to maybe stop or maybe venture forward in a while. Next up is the Worksharp Knife and Tool Sharpener. So this guy here was about my first, this is about the first more than $100 I'd ever spent on sharpening anything. And it did me quite well for a time. However, and I must note, they have expanded upon this guy since. Where is mine? Here it is. So yeah, 2 guides you get for it. Again, it's sort of limited by its guides and, you know, its capabilities. It's got 3 easily available grits, so I'm sure you can probably get some more like somewhat custom made ones. It's basically a mini belt sander, and that'll set off some alarm bells straight away, because anyone who's sharpened extensively on a belt sander knows that giving one to someone who doesn't really know what they're doing could involve lots of burnt blades, warped, you know, edges. Clumsiness is going to really punish you with things like this. Holding it there for too long, bit of a learning curve, and probably not super recommended for a new knife user who perhaps wants to, you know, keep their knives pristine. You can overdo it really quickly with this guy. They've made new ones of these that have sort of analog switches that aren't just on or off. This is one of the earlier examples of it. The Ken Onion stuff, by all accounts, is much better than this, but I haven't used it to put on this tier list. So this one's sitting in the upper middle tier because it is still a very handy general sharpener, but as a knife sharpener, and that's what we're going down this list as, it's a little bit too high risk for what can be a pretty decent reward of a good convex edge. But only does convexes and only does a couple of angles, so it keeps it from getting really much higher on this list than where it's sitting right now. The next up is the Tormek as a knife sharpener. So the Tormek is a really capable machine for sharpening basically anything. It is water cooled. It is a slow RPM, so it won't burn your knives through heat. But what it can do is still get away from you a little bit. And I've put a lot of unintended smiles on my knives with my Tormek. It's good for sharpening chisels, it's good for sharpening scissors, but for your fine, finicky knife edges, there is a real margin for biting a little bit too much into them. And this is me using it for years now, and I will still use this to sharpen Scandinavian edges and things like that, where I'm not really bothered about how it's going to look. You can get blindingly sharp edges with the combination stone on the Tormek. Even my pretty basic Tormek T4, you can get crazy sharp edges on it. I have no doubt about the capabilities of it, but to escalate it any higher, there has to be a removal of like danger to the knife, in my opinion. And the Tormek has a little bit of danger to the knife with, you know, the learning curve and whatnot. And if you do get a Tormek, which I do reckon it's a recommendable tool, if you do get a Tormek, I really suggest practicing a whole bunch on some softer steels, and then maybe get a cheap knife and a good steel. Just really get the feel for it and how it works. It's ingenious, especially the single stone with the dual grits that you change by using the set stone. It's all great ideas. Only other thing about this guy is you need a lot of money in it to get a full sharpening suite. A Tormek with some scissor jaws, some axe jaws, and the 2 knife jaws, even the T4 model that I have is going to be at least $1,000 once you've got everything. And that's in Australia. Maybe in America a little bit less, but a great tool, a quality tool. I can't say anything about the imitation ones. I know there's imitations out there, but I recommend it, but probably not as your main knife sharpening rig unless you really invest the time to practice with it. Now we are entering our top tier now. Well, this is probably the tier, but this is an A tier sharpener. This thing here is great. This is the Worksharp angle set. So they did do an extra set of stones, which is what pushed this up a little bit, because before they did the expansion kit, it did lack a bit of variety, making it not quite the full sharpening suite. And even still, this is limited a bit by its size. So these jaws here, and this stone length here, and the stone width there, it's mainly suited to smaller everyday carry style knives. A larger knife, even a knife like my grey stone here that I've sort of been putting through the paces, a larger knife will sort of test the limits of the sharpening arm even just a little bit. But fixed angle sharpening is great because you can repeat what you do, which is what a lot of people want out of their knife edges. So this guy here is probably pushing about the limits of how big a knife you would want to use in this system. And it is basically like a mini KME or a mini TS Prof, which is systems that I'll get to later. Now, I've never used the Edge Pro. I've never used the, the Piranha or whatever it's called. There's a few other systems like this. There's ones that hold the knife, vertically with the edge pointing towards the ceiling where you come down from. I haven't used all of those. Apparently they're all pretty good, and it really is just a matter of taste. But this is a great entry level into fixed angled sharpening. They do a new version of this now, which is more robust, which is probably more competing with the things like the Tormek and the KME, which I'll show you in a second, spoilers, but they are higher on the list. But as a starter piece with some now really good options in your abrasives, a good Worksharp quality abrasives, I really do recommend this guy, and it's cheap, it's low cost, it's a really good bang for buck machine to get yourself started with some really good knife edges. Sitting in the S tier is the KME knife sharpener, the infamous. I have sharpened at least 1,000 knives on this very sharpener here. It stood the test of time. I've definitely got the money's worth. Actually, Nick Shabazz bought this for me or organized this for me. Lovely man. Years and years ago, and geez, it's stuck around. It's got its stickers on the base. These aren't cheap, but they're about half the price of the next one I'll talk about. And in fact, I would rank them, because of that, about the same on the list as the TS Prof. So these are the top tier, in my opinion, knife sharpeners that you can get. TS Prof and KME. TS Prof is just a more fully realized, heavier duty machine that costs about twice as much for a fully set out TS Prof than the KME. So kind of makes sense. If you don't have TS Prof money and ability to order something from, I think, Russia, where they come from, the KME is an amazing solution to basically any knife. I would put under 7 inches. You can do happily on a KME. This guy here, you can double up the jaws and you can do pretty big, you know, I can do a BK9 really comfortably on the TS Prof. Eventually you do start to add a smile at either end. The angle does change if the blade is super long, simply because it's coming from a central pivot point on both of these. There is also the Lansky variant of this, which I'll probably place further down the tier list, but I don't have it with me and I haven't had it for years now, so I'm not really comfortable placing it because it's been a while. But Lansky do like a very rough version of this, which is probably even like a lower end version of this, really, with a less dial-inable angle system. So there's an option too, but really these are the premium. These are the cream of the crop. If you're just a pocket knife guy, the KME and its very good abrasives will do anything you need. And the TS Prof with its Venev stones will do any knife, like basically up to a largish kitchen knife, really, really well. You're going to spend money on these for sure, but once you're at this level of, you know, proper knife enjoyment, it's a bit like, you know, if you own a car, you're going to spend a bit of money on getting it washed. That, you know, if you own a Lexus or you own a BMW or own a Mercedes, you're going to spend a bit of extra money on the maintenance of it. Like, you're not going to be as bothered because you've already got the down payment in the knife. So I don't see an issue with spending, you know, up to $1,000 on a good knife sharpener. I wouldn't see that as a silly purchase if you have a multi-$1,000 knife collection at all, or even if you just have a few really, really good knives that you want to get the absolute most out of. So that's those. But there's two more things that I'm going to talk about that are in the top tier of knife sharpening gadgets and gizmos. Now the first thing, and I didn't think I'd get here, but the first thing is a bench stone. So a good sharpening stone to do freehand sharpening on it. But if you don't have the skill, then this is firmly down in the B tier at best. But once you learn how to use a bench stone, and I'm finally here, it's taken 10 years of really trying to get my head around it, to properly sharpen on my set of king stones, and I've got a nice little set of sharpening stones now. I've got Besta and king stones. They're all just, none of them are diamonds or anything fancy like that. They're just, I guess, Japanese water stones, of course. And they do a great job. Like, you can get a proper, very finely tuned edge. For me though, like when I'm using it, it will probably still sit somewhere in the A tier because I'm not the best with it yet. But when you give them to someone who's a really good bench stone sharpener, you still can get the absolute best edges you could possibly get just through sheer, you know, skill. And it's pretty cool that that does exist. And yeah, a bench stone could be either in the S tier or could be all the way down in like the C tier if you've got no patience for it and you keep mucking up your knives because you keep accidentally fumbling forward on them. You know, it's a bit of a funny one. It's really dependent on skill, but in a skilled hand, a bench stone is right at the top of the list. And also, a piece of leather stuck with its fuzzy side up on a piece of wood is basically what you need for about 80% of your knife fixes. If you stay on top of your knives with something like that, you might eventually start putting a bit of a micro convex on it, but really you're going to keep a blindingly sharp edge. If you use just a basically good compound, you can even use hardware store compounds. Like, you don't need to go and find the fancy diamond stuff. Really, with a good belt, a good piece of suede leather on a hard, especially if you can get a bit of wide leather on a hard, piece of pine or something like that, you can have a really good time keeping most of your knife maintenance done with basically an almost free thing. So S tier for a lot of reasons, but mainly just because of price, simplicity, and result. And lastly, right up in the S tier, very comfortably, is this piece of kit here. You probably saw it coming. I go on about this guy a lot. This is about the best sort of 50-ish US dollars you can spend in the knife hobby, in my opinion. This Worksharp field sharpener, it's been imitated, but it's never been bested. This just is a little multi-tool of sharpening. This is like the Leatherman of sharpening. And yeah, it doesn't do anything full size. It's got like a bench stone concept that you can, use, It's got a strop concept that you can use. None of these are full-sized implements, but for your rudimentary touch-ups, for keeping it really good, sharp, well finished, because these are good diamond abrasives, the fine and the coarse, well finished edge on a knife, this could almost be all you need. You could be a knife collector and have some good knives and have only this, and you could keep a really good edge on all those blades with just this. It wouldn't be satisfying to you. You'd want the expensive stuff, I know that, but this is an S tier item without a doubt. Really high quality. This is the same one I've had for years now. It's sharpened hundreds of knives. It's done complete resharpenings from absolutely dull. It's done lots of little touch-ups on the strop. This is a really well-built, solid little ingenious idea, and you know, it's probably my favorite sharpening thing overall, just in terms of the sheer like resourcefulness of it. Absolutely love this guy here. But in summary, can't go wrong with a KME or a TS Prof either. Something like this, if you want to invest some time into a bench stone, absolutely, you won't regret it. Eventually, you will regret it many times as you practice and you fuck up your knives. You will regret it several times, I'm sure. But really, once you get that skill down, it's really good time too. And who can go past a good old bit of leather on a piece of wood? Everyone wins. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll add more systems as I review them. I think I've got one on the way from TS Prof again. So keep the channel in your thoughts, and you might see some more sharpening systems pop up in your feed in the next little while, and other knife videos too. Goodbye.